Today I'm going to talk about my favorite game mechanism in Yokohama, one of the many games I played for the first time at Geekway to the West. I'm still working through that list. Yokohama was a really interesting game. It was probably the heaviest game I played at Geekway. A lot of interesting choices, a lot of iconography to learn, a lot of mechanisms to learn, but we had a great teacher with my friend Manny. There's a lot of mechanisms in Yokohama. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to talk about my favorite one, which is the assistant placement mechanism. Yokohama at its core is a worker movement game where you're moving your manager around different actions, and you can be blocked by other players. There's a certain movement, like you can't just move anywhere on the board. You have to move through certain places where you have assistance, and you take the action where you end up, one action per turn. The assistants provide some really interesting decisions here because while this worker's moving around, also in your turn you can place assistants. You can either place up to 2 assistants on the same location or up to 3 assistants on 3 different locations, up to 3 different locations. And the assistants matter for 2 reasons. One, as I just mentioned, they create the path that your manager can move around in. So you can't move your manager onto an action where you don't have assistants. You've sent them ahead to kind of put in a few good words for you for the fishery, the fishmonger, so you can get fish at that place. The assistants also power up the actions. They make the actions themselves more lucrative. So whenever you take an action with your manager, you look at the total number of workers, both your manager and your assistants that you have there, and that total number equals the benefit that you gain from that action. The benefit escalates. It gets better the more workers you have there, with a max of, I believe, 5 total workers. So you get 4 assistants in one manager there. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But so both of these things provide a really interesting decision when you're actually placing those assistants. Do you charge up one action right now that you need to use pretty urgently, or do you spread it out? Do you make kind of a long-term plan with these assistants where you know in the next few turns you're going to use these actions, but then you're hoping to slowly build up the charge, build up a bunch of assistants on one action. So you take these little actions and then a big action. It also provides some really interesting passive player interaction because they're constantly paying attention to where other players are putting their assistants, because you know that if someone is stockpiling a bunch of assistants on a certain action, that must mean they really want that action. They really want to take that action. They really want to take a really powerful version of that action. So you might go there to block them, even if you don't have as many assistants there, or to stall them a little bit. So it provides this interesting passive player interaction as to where you put the assistants, because the assistants themselves don't block anything. It's only your main manager worker that does. So I really like this mechanism in a worker movement game of using these workers, these assistants, to form a path and to charge up actions, to make actions better. I played Istanbul as well at Geekway, and I'll talk about that in a later video. It reminded me a little bit of a more complex Istanbul, but Istanbul doesn't have the charging up mechanism that Yokohama does. That makes it really interesting. It makes you feel really powerful when you take an action that you've been working on for a while. You've been placing one assistant at a time on this certain action, and then suddenly you take that action and you get the most robust, fulfilling version of it. So if you can think of any other games that do this, where you're actually charging up actions in advance. I know that's very specific, but maybe just any game where you're charging up actions, so making them more powerful as you go, or any game, any worker movement game that uses similar mechanisms. I'd love to hear about that in the comments. Or, as I said, Yokohama has a ton of mechanisms, so if you have a favorite mechanism in Yokohama you'd love to share, I'd love to hear about that in the comments as well. Thanks.